Hi lovelies, welcome back to another tutorial on Sew with Abby channel. This tutorial is about this beautiful pencil skirt. If this is what you are interested in, then keep watching. Let's get started. These are the materials I'll be making use of, and for my fabric I have silk fabric here and is about 1.5 yard. So the first thing I'll be doing is to fold out my fabric into two to cut out the front piece. Now I have my fabric folded out into two, so this is my waistline, and I'll just go ahead to input my waist measurement. So my waist measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance. I'm not going to be adding that to this skirt. So now from my waistline again, I'll measure 8 inches down and then rule a straight line across. That is my hip line, and then I'll input my hip measurement. Now this is where the hip allocation starts from, so I'll just go ahead now and input my hip measurement. My hip measurement is 40 inches divided by 4, that's 10. So instead of me to measure out 10, I'll measure out 9 inches and then add 1 inch seam allowance. That is, I deducted 1 inch from my hip measurement. Now from my waistline again, I'll measure out how long I want my skirt to be. The length I want, I've marked it out. So the remaining fabric there is for my hem allowance. So I'll go ahead now and rule a straight line across. Now on my hem line, I'll deduct 1 inch from what I have on my hip line, and then I'll add 1 inch seam allowance. I will go ahead now and connect the lines together. Now I'll come to the part where the fabric is on fold and go in by 1 inch. This is to get rid of any excessive bulging at the front part of the skirt, and then I will slope it down and then go ahead to cut. Now we are done with the front part. The next thing to do is to fold another fabric into two to cut out the back piece. Now this is the back piece, and the first thing I'll do here is to measure out a vertical line of 2.5 inches width, which will serve as my center back line. From the center back line, I'll measure out my waist circumference, that is my waist divided by 4, then add 1 inch seam allowance. Then I'll place my tape rule from the waistline and measure 8 inches down, which is my hip line, and then I'll measure my hip circumference, hip divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance. Here I'm not deducting 1 inch like I did the front part. I'll measure how long I want my skirt to be from the waistline. Then the remaining fabric there is for my hem allowance. I'll rule a straight line across. Then what I have at my hip line, I will deduct 1 inch and measure it on my hem line plus 1 inch seam allowance. Then I'll connect the lines together. Now the next thing I'll do is to replace the 1 inch I deducted at the front hip line outside the vertical line, as you can see, and then I'll connect it to the waistline. From the hip line, I'll measure 5 inches down. If I was working on a longer skirt, I'll measure down 8 inches instead. I will go ahead now to add 1 inch zipper allowance. Now I'm done with the back piece. The next thing to do is to cut it out. We'll go ahead now to stitch the center back, but then I'll measure out 5 inches at the down part for my slit. This is for free movement. Then at the upper part I'll measure down 8 inches. This is for my zipper. Alright guys, I'm done stitching the center back. I left my slit part and also the zipper part. The next thing I'm going to do is to join the back and the front together, so I'll make sure the two sides align and also right sides facing each other. I'll also go ahead to stitch the down part. Alright guys, I'm done joining the sides of the skirt, and the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the band. So I've gone ahead to cut the piece for the band. The width is 2 inches. When I'm done stitching, I'll have 1.5, and the length is long enough to go around my waist. I'll pin the band to the waist of the skirt, take it to the sewing machine, stitch it together, and use the other side of the band to cover it up to give it a neat finishing. Alright guys, I attached the band to the skirt, as you can see, and I also went ahead to fix the zipper. Now the next thing to do is to cut out ruffles for the hem of the skirt, and I have gone ahead to cut out the piece for the ruffles. The width is 10.5 inches long, and the length is twice the measurements I have at the hem of my skirt. That is, I measured what I have at the hem of my skirt, I measured it round and cut out twice the measurement for this piece. I will go ahead to stitch the open end with about half an inch. Alright guys, I'm done, and the next thing I'm going to do is to run a loose stitch, not at the stitch line here, because you'll not be able to fold the gathers, but somewhere at the top of the stitch line. I'm done running the loose stitch, and then I'll pick a thread and gather the fabric. Now I'll just attach the ruffle to the hem of my skirt. I'll measure 2 inches round the hem of the skirt and attach the ruffles on the 2 inches line. Alright guys, I'm done attaching the ruffle to the skirt, and as you can see, it came out beautiful. And with that, we've come to the end of this tutorial. Do not forget to subscribe, like and share. See you in my next video.